Hey, so tonight we're going to dive deep into a world you rarely see depicted on screen or in history books. Forget the grand colosseums and the Stoic senators. We're peeling back the layers to expose what Romans truly did when no one, or at least no official eye, was watching. It's a side of Roman life that's gritty, raw, and often surprisingly familiar in its human frailties, yet utterly alien in its context. We're talking about the private moments, the secret sins, the daily struggles hidden from public scrutiny. Before we truly step back in time, go ahead and hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and drop a comment below with where you're listening from and what time it is for you. Alright, find that cozy spot, pull your blanket up tight, and let's unlock the hidden chambers of ancient Rome. Imagine, if you will, waking up not to the gentle hum of your refrigerator or the soft glow of a digital alarm, but to the insistent braying of a donkey outside your window, the distant cries of street vendors hawking their wares, and the ever-present, acrid scent of charcoal smoke and unwashed humanity wafting through your thinly shuttered window. This isn't some romanticized depiction of ancient Rome, with marble statues and toga-clad philosophers debating in sunlit forums. No, this is the gritty reality of your Roman home, the place where you, a Roman citizen, spent the majority of your unobserved hours. You're not waking in a temperature-controlled room. The morning chill bites at your bare skin, a stark contrast to the stifling heat of a summer night, both extremes equally unwelcome. Your bed, if you're fortunate enough to have one that isn't just a straw pallet on the floor, is likely a wooden frame with woven straps supporting a mattress stuffed with wool, feathers, or dry leaves. It's surprisingly uncomfortable, a far cry from your memory foam mattress, I assure you, as you swing your legs over the side. Your bare feet meet the cold, hard-packed earth or worn stone floor, instantly reminding you of the lack of warmth. There's no plush rug, no underfloor heating, just the unforgiving surface of your dwelling. You stretch, a familiar, universal human gesture, but your muscles ache, not just from sleep, but from the physical demands of Roman life, the walking, the carrying, the constant effort just to exist. Your stomach rumbles, and you reach for a piece of stale bread left over from yesterday's meager supper, perhaps dipping it into a watered-down wine if you're a person of some means, or simply chewing it dry if you're among the working poor. There's no instant coffee, no fresh fruit from a distant land, just the basic sustenance that keeps you going. Now let's talk about hygiene, shall we? This is where the starkest contrast with your modern life truly manifests. You, in your cozy bed, likely have a private bathroom just steps away, complete with flushing toilet, hot and cold running water, and an array of fragrant soaps and lotions. In your Roman home, particularly if you live in an insula, a multi-story apartment block, common in bustling cities like Rome itself, the reality is far, far grimier. There's no indoor plumbing as you know it. When nature calls, and it does so with an urgency that brooks no delay, your options are limited. Most likely, a chamber pot sits in a discreet or not-so-discreet corner of your sleeping chamber. This ceramic or wooden vessel, used by everyone in your small family unit, quickly fills throughout the night. The smell, even if you've grown accustomed to it, is undeniable, a pungent, ammoniac presence that lingers in the cool morning air. In the morning, the task falls to someone, usually a slave if you own one, or perhaps the lowest-ranking family member, to empty this communal receptacle. Where does it go? Well, if you're lucky, there's a shared communal latrine on the ground floor or nearby, a long bench with holes cut into it, where you squat side by side with your neighbors, often without any privacy whatsoever, sharing gossip and the common facilities. The waste drops into a channel below, hopefully flushed by a trickle of water, eventually making its way into the city's drainage system. But often, especially in the upper floors of an insula, the chamber pot's contents are simply, unceremoniously dumped out of the window into the narrow, unpaved street below, accompanied by a quick shout of, "Cave! Beware!" to warn any unsuspecting pedestrians. You would be wise to heed such warnings, for stepping in a pile of human refuse is not an uncommon occurrence. Imagine the streets not paved with the clean tarmac, but often muddy, uneven and liberally coated with animal droppings, food scraps and the nocturnal leavings of countless households. The stench of Roman streets, dear listener, was a constant, pervasive presence, an unforgettable olfactory assault that your modern nose would find utterly repulsive. Personal cleanliness, too, is a public rather than private affair. You don't have a private shower to wash away the grime of the day. Instead, you would make your way, perhaps after a quick splash of cold water from a basin or cistern, to the public baths. These weren't just places for cleaning. They were social hubs, gymnasiums, libraries and meeting places. But before you get to the grandeur of the public baths, your morning routine in your own home is far more rudimentary. A small basin, a pitcher of cold water, and perhaps a piece of pumice stone or a simple cloth are your tools. There's no fancy toothpaste. You might rub your teeth with a mixture of salt and herbs, or even pulverized mouse brains. Yes, really, some ancient texts recommend it. Your breath, I guarantee, would not be as minty fresh as you're used to. Your skin, perpetually exposed to dust and grime, feels rough and coarse. Without soap as you know it, you use oils and scrapers, strigils, to remove dirt and sweat. A process that is effective, but not particularly luxurious. Dressing is also a far simpler affair than your modern wardrobe allows. For a man, a simple tunic, perhaps a toga if you're a citizen heading out for public duties. For a woman, a stola and palla. There's no array of fast fashion, no endless choices, just practical garments suited to the climate and your social status. The fabric is likely wool or linen, rough against your skin, not the soft, breathable cotton or synthetic blends you take for granted. You would feel the weight of the fabric, the stiffness, the way it clings when damp or scratches when dry. You dress quickly, often in shared spaces with family members or slaves moving about you. There's little concept of personal space or privacy in the way you experience it today. Even in a relatively affluent Roman household, the domus might have several rooms, but they are often open to one another with curtains rather than solid doors, and a constant flow of people, family, slaves, clients, visitors, moving through them. Consider the sounds of your Roman home, particularly in an insula. Walls are thin, windows are unglazed or covered with animal bladder, allowing every sound from your neighbors and the street to penetrate. You hear the arguments of the family next door, the cries of a baby, the clatter of pots from the shared kitchen, the rhythmic grind of a millstone, the endless chatter of voices, and the incessant creaking of the wooden structure itself. There's no quiet refuge, no soundproofing, no escape from the relentless symphony of ancient urban life. Sleep is often interrupted, light, and rarely truly restorative, a marked contrast to the deep, silent slumber you might enjoy in your insulated, quiet home. And the smells. The smells. Beyond the chamber pot and the street, your home itself carries a distinct aroma. The smell of cooking food, often a stew of lentils or vegetables, perhaps with some salted fish, hangs heavy in the air. The faint, earthy scent of damp plaster or stone mingled with the woody aroma of the charcoal brazier used for heating or cooking, the lingering scent of cheap olive oil used for lamps, and the human smell, pervasive and undeniable, of bodies that are not washed daily with perfumed soaps. There's no air freshener, no ventilation system, just the natural circulation of air, or lack thereof, within the confined space. When you think of a Roman home, you might envision the beautiful mosaics, the frescoes, the elegant courtyards. And yes, in the grand domus of the truly wealthy, these existed. But even there, behind the public facade, the realities of life were far less glamorous. Slaves, unseen by guests, would be toiling in cramped, dark spaces, preparing food, cleaning, attending to the master's every need. The master himself perhaps reclining on an elegant couch during a private dinner, would still be acutely aware of the lack of amenities you consider basic. He would still deal with the smoke from oil lamps, the presence of vermin, mice, rats, lice, and the ever-present threat of fire in a city built largely of wood and poorly constructed insulae. The concept of a truly private, personal space, a sanctuary where you could be utterly alone, away from the watchful eyes of family, slaves, or neighbors, is practically non-existent for most Romans. Your life, even within the walls of your home, was largely a communal existence. Your thoughts might be your own, but your physical presence, your daily routines, your bodily functions, they were often shared, observed, and integrated into the fabric of a society that valued community over individual privacy. This stark difference in the very definition of a home and personal space is perhaps one of the most profound revelations when you truly step into the daily life of an ancient Roman, far from the public gaze, within the rough-hewn walls of their private world. The silence you crave, the cleanliness you expect, the solitude you cherish. These were luxuries almost unimaginable to the average Roman, a stark reminder of how deeply our modern world has reshaped our most intimate experiences. You exist in a bubble of comfort and personal autonomy that would baffle them, an insular existence by design. Think about that the next time you step into your pristine, private bathroom or close your bedroom door for some alone time. They simply didn't have it. Now let's step beyond the physical confines of the Roman home and into the unseen world of belief, where the lines between public worship and private devotion, between sanctioned religion and illicit superstition, blurred into a captivating, often terrifying tapestry. You, as a Roman, were expected to participate in public cults, to honor the state gods, to attend festivals, and to perform the appropriate rituals for the well-being of the empire. This was a civic duty, a public performance of piety. But when no one was watching, when the official priests and magistrates weren't present, what did you do? What anxieties gnawed at your soul? And to whom did you whisper your deepest fears and most desperate hopes? Inside your home, tucked away from the prying eyes of the street, you would have had your lararium. This was your personal shrine, often a small niche in the wall or a beautifully painted panel, sometimes simply a small table. Here, you would venerate your lares, the household gods who protected your home and family, and your penates, who safeguarded your food and provisions. This was your most intimate connection to the divine, a space where you could offer private prayers, a pinch of incense, a small offering of wine, or a bit of food from your meal. You might light a small lamp, the flickering flame casting dancing shadows on the painted figures, and speak aloud to these unseen protectors, confiding your worries about a sick child, a failing harvest, or the safe return of a loved one from war. This wasn't about public display. It was about genuine, deeply personal intercession, a private conversation with the spirits woven into the fabric of your daily existence. But your spiritual world extended far beyond these comforting household deities. Roman society, despite its advancements, was permeated by a deep-seated fear of the unknown, a profound belief in omens, curses, and malevolent forces. When public rituals failed, or when your needs were too personal, too transgressive, or simply too desperate to be uttered in a public temple, you turned to other avenues. You might, for example, worry incessantly about a rival in business, a scorned lover, or a legal opponent. You couldn't openly pray for their downfall in the forum, but in the quiet solitude of your own thoughts, fueled by envy or revenge, you might seek out a practitioner of magic. Imagine yourself making your way through the winding, dimly lit back alleys of Rome, avoiding the main thoroughfares, perhaps pulling your cloak tighter around you to conceal your face. You're seeking out someone known only through hushed whispers, a magus or a venefica, a sorcerer or a witch who operates far from the watchful eyes of the authorities. These individuals, often seen as outsiders or even criminals, dealt in a potent, dangerous, and very personal form of spirituality. You pay them handsomely, perhaps with a small silver coin, perhaps with a promise of future service, to craft a defixio, a curse tablet. Picture the scene in a cramped, smoky room lit by a single sputtering oil lamp. The practitioner meticulously inscribes your enemy's name onto a thin sheet of lead, sometimes backwards, sometimes with arcane symbols and invocations to underworld deities like Hecate or Pluto. They might prick a doll made of wax or clay, symbolizing your adversary, or tie knots into a thread, each knot representing a binding spell. You whisper your desires, for your rival's tongue to be bound in court, for their love life to be ruined, for their business to fail, for their body to be racked with illness. The air is thick with the scent of herbs, stale smoke, and the heavy weight of dark intentions. This isn't the dignified ritual of the public priest. This is raw, primal magic, fueled by human malice and despair. Once inscribed, the tablet is rolled or folded, perhaps pierced with a nail, and then, under the cloak of darkness, you bury it in a grave, drop it into a well, or nail it to a temple wall, hoping its proximity to the dead or the underworld will empower its malevolent intent. You do this in secret, of course, because associating with such practices could bring you disgrace or worse, legal prosecution if discovered. But in that moment, the desperate hope that your enemy will suffer, unseen and unheard by all but the spirits you've invoked, provides a perverse, chilling satisfaction. Conversely, perhaps you are consumed by unrequited love. The object of your affection seems oblivious, or worse, favors another. You cannot simply declare your love in public if societal norms forbid it, or if they are married. So, in secret, you might seek a love spell. The practitioner might concoct a potion, a mixture of herbs, animal blood, and other unsavory ingredients, which you are told to secretly administer to your beloved. Or they might create an amulet imbued with supposed power to be worn close to the skin, drawing the desired person towards you. These secret rituals speak to the fundamental human desire for control, for influence over forces seemingly beyond your grasp, whether it be love or fate. You perform these acts in the darkest hours, when the city sleeps, your heart pounding with a mixture of fear and desperate hope. Omens were another constant source of private anxiety and interpretation. You might see a flock of birds fly in a particular pattern, hear the hoot of an owl, or stumble upon a lizard crossing your path. While public augurs interpreted omens for the state, your personal interpretation, your private dread or joy, was your own burden to bear. A crow flying from the left might fill you with quiet apprehension about a journey, while a snake shedding its skin could be a secret sign of renewal. You might observe the entrails of a sacrificed animal, not for public ceremony, but in a private attempt to divine your own future, seeking answers to personal questions that you dared not voice aloud. You sought meaning in every random event, every unusual occurrence, searching for reassurance or warning, far from the official pronouncements. Some individuals, drawn to more esoteric or forbidden practices, might even join secret cults, operating entirely outside the official Roman pantheon. Consider the cult of Mithras, which spread throughout the empire, particularly among soldiers. These were mystery religions with initiation rites and secret rituals performed in underground temples called Mithraea. You, as an initiate, would be led into a dimly lit, often windowless chamber, perhaps with stars painted on the ceiling. You would undergo a series of symbolic tests, perhaps even mock trials or brandings, progressing through different grades of initiation. The focus was on personal salvation, a deep connection with the god Mithras, a bull-slaying deity whose worship was far more intimate and personal than the grand. Public sacrifices to Jupiter or Mars. These were brotherhoods, where you forged deep bonds with fellow initiates, sharing secrets and sacred meals, all in a clandestine setting, away from the prying eyes of the uninitiated and sometimes the wary gaze of the Roman authorities, who viewed any non-state sanctioned cult with suspicion. Or perhaps the allure of the banned Bacchic rites, even after their notorious suppression in 186 BCE, still held sway for some. Though public bacchanalia were forbidden, the human desire for ecstatic release, for communion with the divine through frenzy and intoxication, did not simply vanish. Small, clandestine groups might still meet in secret, in secluded villas or hidden groves, to partake in forbidden revelries. You might join such a gathering, the promise of uninhibited freedom, of shedding the constraints of Roman society, proving irresistible, under the cover of night, with wine flowing freely, inhibition stripped away, and perhaps rhythmic drumming filling the air. You might participate in rituals that involved wild dancing, shouting and communion with the deity Bacchus, a god of wine, fertility, and madness. These were moments of intense, visceral experience, where the boundaries of self and society dissolved, all occurring far from the public eye, where such excesses would be met with swift and brutal punishment. The thrill of the forbidden, the deep spiritual craving for an experience beyond the mundane, drove people to these secret assemblies, risking everything for a moment of unbridled connection. The human need for spiritual comfort, for answers to life's profound mysteries, for a sense of control over an unpredictable world, is universal. In Rome, when the public temples felt distant and the official gods aloof, you sought solace, power, or revenge in the shadows, among the whispers of private prayers and the dangerous allure of secret superstitions. These were the moments when you were most vulnerable, most human, grappling with hopes and fears that transcended the grandeur of the empire in the quiet, unobserved corners of your ancient Roman soul. And it's in these quiet, private acts that you see a reflection of our own enduring human struggle to make sense of the universe, to find meaning and solace, and sometimes to bend fate to our will, even if only through a whispered curse or a fervent, unseen prayer. Tonight, we delve deeper into the shadows, past the everyday anxieties of private prayer, and into the realm of truly forbidden revelry. Forget the carefully orchestrated public festivals, the parades, and the sanctioned communal meals. We're talking about what happened when the rules were explicitly broken, when the very fabric of Roman moral order was challenged by desires that simmered beneath the surface. You, as a Roman citizen, were constantly under pressure to maintain your public persona, your gravitas, your adherence to tradition. But what did you do when that persona became too heavy a burden, when the allure of unbridled pleasure and ecstatic release called to you from the hidden corners of the city? We begin our journey into the world of forbidden feasts and hidden pleasures with perhaps the most famous example of sanctioned moral panic in Roman history, the Bacchanalia. In 186 BCE, Rome was rocked by a scandal that led to a brutal crackdown on the cult of Bacchus. The official narrative painted a picture of drunken orgies, sexual promiscuity, poisonings, and conspiracies, all conducted under the cloak of night. And while the Senate's motives for suppressing the cult were undoubtedly complex, a mix of genuine moral outrage, political maneuvering, and a desire to control foreign cults, the fact remains that for a time, these secret rites offered a profound escape from the strictures of Roman life. Imagine you are living in the early 2nd century BCE, perhaps feeling the weight of societal expectations, the endless striving for status, the rigid social hierarchy. You hear whispers of these gatherings dedicated to Bacchus, the god of wine, madness, and ecstasy. The whispers suggest a place where the normal rules of gender, class, and social decorum are suspended. The allure is undeniable. You are told to come after dark to a secluded villa outside the city walls, or perhaps a hidden cellar beneath a seemingly ordinary Roman house. As you approach, a sense of illicit excitement, mixed with genuine fear, courses through you. The air is thick with the scent of wine, incense, and human bodies. You might hear rhythmic drumming, the reedy wail of pipes, and the murmur of chanting voices. You are ushered into a dimly lit chamber, perhaps decorated with ivy and vine leaves, the symbols of Bacchus. The first thing that strikes you is the sheer diversity of the crowd, men and women, young and old, patrician and plebeian, even slaves, all mingled together, shedding their public identities at the threshold. This blurring of social distinctions, so antithetical to Roman society, is itself a thrill, a taste of freedom. The wine flows freely, often unmixed with water, a potent brew designed to loosen inhibitions. You drink deeply, feeling the warmth spread through your limbs, dulling your anxieties. Soon, the music intensifies, the chanting grows louder, and the dancing begins. It's not the stately, controlled dancing of public festivals. This is wild, uninhibited, almost primal. People sway, leap, and whirl, their movements becoming increasingly frantic, their faces flushed with intoxication and ecstasy. You feel a surge of energy, a release you rarely experience in your sober, disciplined daily life. As the night progresses, the scene becomes more intense. The light dims further, perhaps only flickering torches illuminating the frenetic movements. Stories from the ancient sources suggest that these gatherings could descend into sexual promiscuity, men and women coupling freely, unburdened by marital vows or social taboos. You might witness acts that would be utterly scandalous in daylight, performed openly and without shame within this secret circle. The air crackles with a potent mix of desire, spiritual fervor, and pure, unadulterated hedonism. Some accounts even speak of ritualized violence, of animal sacrifices followed by the tearing apart of the raw flesh, sparagmos, a symbolic act of communion with the wild, untamed nature of Bacchus. The experience is overwhelming, a sensory assault. The pounding drums vibrate through your chest. The intoxicating scent of wine and sweat fills your nostrils. The taste of forbidden pleasures lingers on your tongue, and the sight of bodies moving in uninhibited abandon fills your eyes. You feel a profound connection not just to the deity, but to the collective unconscious of the participants, a shared moment of ecstatic transcendence that leaves you both exhilarated and perhaps a little terrified. This wasn't just about getting drunk, it was about seeking a direct, visceral experience of the divine, a temporary escape from the rational order of the world, a glimpse into the raw, passionate core of human nature. When the sun begins to creep over the horizon, painting the sky with hues of dawn, the revelry gradually subsides. You stumble out into the morning air, your head throbbing, your body aching, but your mind buzzing with the memory of the night. You quickly redon your public mask, straighten your toga, and make your way back to your conventional life, carrying the secret of the Bacchanalia deep within you. The risk was immense. Discovery could mean execution, confiscation of property, or public shaming. But for those who sought it, the lure of such forbidden feasts, the promise of shedding societal constraints, was a powerful, almost irresistible force. But the Bacchanalia, though the most famous, was not the only form of hidden pleasure or forbidden gathering. Throughout Roman history, there were always cults and practices that operated on the fringes, sometimes tolerated, sometimes suppressed. Consider the myriad of foreign cults that flowed into Rome from the farthest reaches of the empire. The ecstatic rites of Cybele, the solemn mysteries of Isis, various Syrian deities. While some of these eventually found a degree of official acceptance, many began as secret gatherings appealing to individuals seeking a more personal, emotional connection to the divine than the formal state religion offered. You might find yourself drawn to an Isis cult, participating in nocturnal ceremonies, elaborate rituals, and a focus on resurrection and an afterlife, far more comforting than the rather bleak Roman underworld. These gatherings often involved fasting, purification rituals, and symbolic journeys, all conducted away from public scrutiny, forging a strong sense of community among the initiates. Beyond religious rites, there were simply private parties that spiraled beyond acceptable bounds. In the lavish villas of the wealthy, when the doors were closed, the slaves instructed to be discreet, and the prying eyes of society kept at bay, the boundaries of propriety could be pushed to their limits. Imagine a private banquet where the food is not just extravagant, but deliberately bizarre. Peacock's tongues, flamingo brains, dormice stuffed with spices, a display of wealth so extreme it bordered on the grotesque. The entertainment might include not just musicians and dancers, but actors performing lewd comedies or gladiatorial contests on a miniature scale. Even private theatrical performances that satirized public figures or societal norms with biting, unprintable humor. The wine, again, would be plentiful, and often spiced with herbs or even drugs to enhance the experience. Hallucinogenic fungi, poppy extracts, or other intoxicating substances might be secretly introduced, leading to altered states of consciousness, heightened senses, and a loosening of all inhibitions. These were not public spectacles. These were carefully curated experiences for a select few, designed to shock, delight, and transgress. Conversations might turn to gossip so scandalous it could ruin reputations if overheard, or to political conspiracies hatched over overflowing wine cups, far from the watchful ears of informers. And of course, sexual desires, often tightly controlled in public, could find much freer expression in these hidden spaces. Adultery, prostitution beyond sanctioned brothels, and various forms of sexual activity deemed taboo or shameful in the public sphere could flourish in the private, unobserved setting of these decadent gatherings. Guests might retire to private chambers with courtesans or with one another, indulging desires that would never see the light of day. The goal was often pure, unadulterated pleasure, a temporary rebellion against the strictures of Roman morality, where the public face of modesty and virtue could be utterly discarded. These forbidden feasts and hidden pleasures served as an essential pressure valve for Roman society. They allowed individuals, especially the wealthy and powerful who had the most to lose, to momentarily escape the constant scrutiny and expectations that defined their lives. They were spaces of transgression, where the boundaries of self and society could be tested, where desires, both spiritual and carnal, could be fully expressed without immediate judgment. But they were always conducted under the shadow of discovery, a thrilling and terrifying knowledge that kept the experience potent and deeply personal. You, the Roman participant, would leave these gatherings with a secret, a memory of liberation and indulgence that would sustain you, or perhaps haunt you, until the next whispered invitation to step into the darkness. It's a testament to the enduring human need for escape, for ecstasy, and for the thrilling danger of the forbidden, a need that persists in different forms even in your own supposedly liberated modern world. Now let us turn our gaze to a darker, far more brutal aspect of Roman life, one that transpired largely unseen by the public, within the walls of domus and villa, and in the cramped, desolate slave quarters. You, the modern listener, might conceptualize slavery through films where it's often depicted in broad strokes of revolt or gladiatorial combat. But the true horror, the ceaseless grind, the complete dehumanization, and the quiet despair of daily life as a Roman slave, particularly when the master's public performance of magnanimity or indifference dropped, is a reality that gnaws at the soul. This isn't a story of grand battles. It's a story of constant subjugation, of lives lived in the shadows, of hopes crushed, and small acts of defiance performed when no one truly important was watching. Imagine yourself a slave in a wealthy Roman household. Your day begins before dawn, often with a rough shove or the sharp sting of a whip to rouse you from a fitful sleep. Your bed is likely a straw pallet on a dirt floor, shared with several other slaves in a cramped, unlit room, perhaps beneath the kitchen or in a secluded corner of the courtyard, far from the master's luxurious chambers. The air is cold, damp, and thick with the combined scent of unwashed bodies, stale food, and the pervasive earthy smell of the ground. There's no privacy, no personal space. Every movement, every breath is shared. You are a chattel, a piece of property, and your comfort, your dignity are of no concern to your owner. Your morning routine is not your own. You are immediately put to work, fetching water, tending fires, grinding grain, cleaning latrines, preparing your master's elaborate breakfast. Your hands are calloused, your back aches perpetually, and your stomach growls with a hunger that is never fully satisfied. You move silently, efficiently, always aware of the watchful eyes of the vilica or atriensis, the slave overseers whose loyalty lies with the master, and whose punishments for perceived slowness or insolence are swift and often brutal. A harsh word, a slap across the face, a blow with a stick. These are common occurrences dealt out with an arbitrary cruelty that keeps you in a constant state of low-level fear. You learn to anticipate, to obey, to make yourself as invisible and indispensable as possible. When no one important is watching, you mean to say, when the master or his guests are not observing your public performance of servitude, the true reality of your existence bites. In the vast kitchens, out of sight, tensions simmer. Other slaves, equally oppressed, might lash out at each other, mirroring the cruelty they receive. There are hushed conversations, murmurs of complaint, dreams of freedom that are quickly suppressed. You share a look of understanding with another slave as you carry heavy amphorae, a silent acknowledgement of your shared misery. These are your moments of connection, fragile and dangerous, but vital for your sanity. Physical abuse is a constant shadow. While a master might be reluctant to maim a valuable slave in public view, behind closed doors, in the quiet of the slave quarters, or a secluded storeroom, different rules apply. A slave who breaks a valuable vase, who speaks out of turn, who is caught stealing a morsel of food, or who simply incurs the master's arbitrary displeasure, faces severe punishment. The lash, the rod, even torture were instruments of control. Imagine the chilling sound of a whip striking flesh muffled by thick walls, or the cries of a fellow slave quickly silenced. You might witness such an event, forced to watch, a stark reminder of your own precarious position, a chilling lesson in obedience. These horrors unfolded unseen, unheard by the outside world, perpetuating a cycle of terror and submission. Sexual exploitation was also a grim reality for many slaves, particularly women, but also young men. A master might take a female slave as a concubine, forcing himself upon her with impunity. There was no concept of consent for a slave. Her body was her master's property to be used as he saw fit. Such acts would happen in the quiet of the master's private rooms, away from the public eye, yet creating a silent trauma that haunted the victim daily. Similarly, young male slaves might be subject to the master's desires. These encounters, occurring in secret, were a profound violation, stripping the individual of their last vestiges of self-ownership. The shame, the fear, the utter powerlessness were burdens carried silently. For speaking out was unthinkable and would only lead to further punishment. Despite the constant surveillance and oppression, slaves found ways to carve out meager private lives, hidden from their masters. In the brief moments of respite after their exhausting duties, perhaps late at night when the household slept, you might gather with a few trusted companions. In the darkness, you would share stories of your homelands, forbidden folklore, and dreams of a life free from bondage. You might teach each other the songs and languages of your native lands, clinging to fragments of your former identities. These clandestine meetings, conducted in hushed whispers, were a lifeline, a way to maintain a sense of humanity in a system designed to strip it away. You might form secret bonds of affection, even love, with other slaves, creating families of choice in a world that denied you the right to have your own. These relationships were precarious, constantly threatened by the whims of the master who could sell, separate, or abuse at any moment. But for a fleeting moment, in the shared darkness, you felt human connection, a solace against the crushing weight of your servitude. Small acts of resistance, too, were often performed when no one was watching. A broken tool, a delayed task, a subtle act of sabotage. These were not open rebellions, which often met with catastrophic failure, but quiet, almost invisible ways to reclaim a sliver of agency. You might intentionally slow your work, or subtly spoil a dish that the master would never detect, but would nonetheless be imperfect. These were dangerous games, but they offered a psychological release, a way to assert some control, however minor, over your own life, a silent rebellion against the tyranny of your existence. The emotional toll of slavery was immense. You carried a constant burden of fear, humiliation, and quiet despair. The lack of control over your own body, your own destiny, was a constant, gnawing presence. You witnessed horrific acts, endured unspeakable pain, and suppressed your emotions to survive. Where did this all go? It festered within, sometimes leading to quiet madness, sometimes to a hardened stoicism, sometimes to a desperate, secret hope for manumission. The promise of freedom that kept some slaves going through decades of servitude. But even the quiet moments of death offered little reprieve. When a slave died, particularly if they were old or sick and had little value, their death might go largely unmourned by the master. Their body might be unceremoniously disposed of, perhaps buried in an unmarked grave, or simply left in a common pit, a stark contrast to the elaborate funeral rites afforded to citizens. Yet among their fellow slaves, a quiet, clandestine mourning might take place. In the dark of night, you might gather to remember the deceased, sharing whispered condolences, performing small, secret rituals of remembrance, acknowledging the life of someone whose existence was deemed disposable by the powerful. These were moments of profound, shared humanity, enacted away from the indifferent gaze of their owners, a testament to the enduring human spirit even in the face of absolute dehumanization. The world of the Roman slave, particularly in the unseen hours and spaces, was one of profound suffering, ceaseless labor, and constant fear. It was a world where human beings were reduced to property, stripped of their rights, their dignity, and often their lives, all behind the closed doors of Roman respectability. When no one was watching, the Roman slave endured the full, unmitigated brutality of the system, clinging to fragile connections, small acts of defiance, and the enduring, secret hope for a freedom that for most would never come. It's a stark, uncomfortable truth that underlies the grandeur of Rome, a silent testament to the human cost of empire, a hidden wound in the gleaming marble facade, leaving you with a chilling sense of how fragile humanity can be when power is absolute and unchecked. Tonight, we pull back the opulent curtains of Roman political life, moving beyond the public debates in the Senate, the grand speeches in the Forum, and the carefully choreographed elections. We're stepping into the hushed antechambers, the secret gardens, and the cloaked meetings where true power was often forged or violently dismantled when no one but the conspirators themselves were watching. You, the listener, accustomed to the transparency, or at least the illusion of it, of modern politics, would find the Roman political landscape a labyrinth of intrigue, betrayal, and sudden, brutal violence. Here, loyalty was a fickle thing, ambition a consuming fire, and death often the swift, silent answer to political inconvenient truths. Imagine you are a senator, a man of power and influence, or perhaps a powerful matron, wielding influence behind the scenes through your male relatives. The stakes are immense: wealth, honor, control over vast provinces, even the very direction of the empire. Publicly, you maintain a veneer of civility, exchanging greetings and pleasantries with your rivals. But privately, in the deep recesses of your mind and in clandestine meetings, plans are being hatched that could alter the course of history or end a life. The air in these secret gatherings is thick with tension, with the scent of expensive incense meant to mask the lingering smell of fear and anticipation. You gather with a trusted few, Men whose loyalty you believe you can count on, men bound to you by shared ambition, common enemies, or deep-seated grievances. Perhaps you meet in a secluded chamber of a sprawling domus, its doors heavily barred, slaves specifically chosen for their loyalty or their deafness, serving wine to loosen tongues while keeping silent vigil. Or perhaps you gather in a private garden at dusk, the rustling leaves and chirping cicadas masking your whispered words, the fading light offering a sense of anonymity. The conversations are veiled, coded. Direct talk of assassination is rare at first, replaced by euphemisms, removing an obstacle, ensuring the stability of the Republic, a necessary correction. You discuss the vulnerabilities of your target, their routines, their allies, their weaknesses. You debate methods, poison, a discreet dagger, an accident. The goal is always to maintain plausible deniability, to ensure that when the deed is done, no direct evidence points back to you. The very air you breathe in these moments feels heavy with the weight of consequence, of the life you are contemplating taking, and the potential ruin if you are discovered. Let's consider the ultimate private political act: assassination. In Roman history, from Caesar to numerous emperors, this was a chillingly common feature of the political landscape. When the Senate couldn't get rid of a tyrant through legal means, or when rivals grew too powerful, the dagger often became the ultimate arbiter. Imagine the intricate planning involved, all conducted in the strictest secrecy. You and your co-conspirators might meet for weeks, even months, planning every detail. Who will strike the blow? Where will it happen? How will you ensure your escape? And crucially, how will you control the narrative afterwards? You need to ensure that the public will either accept your version of events or be too intimidated to question it. Take, for instance, the famous assassination of Julius Caesar. While it happened in a public space, the theatre of Pompey, the plotting, the recruitment of dozens of senators, the forging of a unified purpose against such a powerful figure, all transpired in the utmost secrecy. Picture the conspirators meeting in private homes, exchanging furtive glances and whispered conversations in the Senate, testing the waters of each other's discontent. The tension must have been unbearable, each man wondering if the person he confided in might betray him to Caesar. The constant dread of discovery, the fear of Caesar's formidable intelligence network, would have hung over every meeting like a suffocating shroud. They had to act in unison precisely when Caesar was at his most vulnerable, a moment they carefully engineered. When the daggers finally flashed, it was the culmination of months of hidden resentments and clandestine plotting, erupting in a sudden, brutal burst of violence that irrevocably altered Roman history. Poison was another favored tool of political elimination, precisely because of its discreet nature. It left fewer overt traces than a dagger, and could be administered in a private setting. A meal, a drink, even an ointment. Imagine the chilling scenario: a powerful senator, or even an emperor, is a problem. You or your agents quietly procure a potent, often untraceable poison from a specialist, a benefica, or a private doctor. This is not a public transaction. It is conducted in hushed tones in the shadows, with a hefty payment exchanging hands. The poison is then administered, perhaps mixed into a favorite wine at a private banquet, or subtly applied to a piece of food by a bribed slave. The victim might fall ill slowly, their decline attributed to natural causes or sudden illness. Their private suffering, their agonizing death, would occur behind the closed doors of their domus, far from public scrutiny. The family mourns, doctors are consulted, but the true cause, the hidden hand that orchestrated their demise, remains a terrible secret. You, the conspirator, watch from a distance, publicly expressing condolences, while privately, a cold satisfaction settles in your heart. The removal of an enemy, achieved without public blame, was a dark art mastered by many in the cutthroat world of Roman politics. Empress Livia, wife of Augustus, was often rumored to have been a master of this particular dark art, quietly removing rivals to her son Tiberius's succession. These were not public acts of justice, but rather private acts of strategic violence, aimed at securing power through quiet, deadly means. Blackmail and coercion were also potent, unseen weapons in the political arsenal. Imagine a senator with a hidden vice, an illicit affair, or a secret financial scandal. You, an ambitious rival, uncover this information through a network of spies, slaves, freedmen, or informants who operate in the shadows of Roman society, gathering intelligence on everyone of importance. This information is not publicly aired, at least not at first. Instead, you use it in private, approaching your target in a secluded room, presenting them with the stark choice: comply with your demands, support your legislative agenda, or face public ruin. The fear in their eyes, the quiet desperation, is a victory more satisfying than any public triumph. These were the unseen strings pulled behind the scenes, manipulating votes, shifting alliances, and shaping policy through the subtle leverage of hidden secrets. The power of wealthy Roman women, though not directly political in the public sphere, was often enormous in the private domain. A matron could influence her husband, sons, and powerful clients through whispered advice, carefully cultivated social networks, and private machinations. She might host lavish dinners where alliances were forged and information discreetly exchanged. She might arrange marriages to consolidate power or break them to dismantle rival families. These were not acts performed in the forum, but in the elegant private dining rooms and sprawling gardens of Rome's most influential homes, where the true dynamics of power were often negotiated away from male-dominated public view. Her counsel, her opinions, her manipulation of social dynamics, all operated in the unobserved realm of elite private life, shaping the destinies of men and, by extension, the empire. Even legal disputes often had an unseen layer of manipulation. While court cases were public, the securing of witnesses, the bribing of judges, the quiet intimidation of opponents all happened away from the public gaze. You might send agents to threaten a witness or discreetly offer a substantial sum to a juror. The outcome of a trial could be decided not by the merits of the case presented in open court, but by the unseen hand of powerful individuals operating in the shadows. The Roman legal system, though impressive, was often deeply corruptible when no one was truly watching its inner workings. The constant paranoia and fear that permeated Roman elite society were a direct consequence of this shadow play. You, the powerful Roman, always had to be wary. Every dinner guest, every slave, every seemingly innocent conversation could be a potential threat. You tested your wine for poison, you listened for whispers behind your back, you constantly evaluated the loyalty of your allies. This created a culture of deep mistrust, where genuine relationships were rare, and every interaction carried a subtle undercurrent of suspicion. The weight of this constant vigilance, this need to project an image of unwavering strength while secretly guarding against unseen enemies, must have been utterly exhausting. When the history books recount the grand triumphs and political achievements of Rome, they often gloss over the brutal, unseen mechanics that underpinned them. They don't linger on the quiet desperation of a poisoned victim, the chilling precision of a plotted assassination, or the silent blackmail that shaped the careers of powerful men. But it was in these hidden acts, these private conspiracies, and these political daggers that the true, ruthless nature of Roman power often revealed itself. It was a world where ambition knew no bounds, where human life was expendable in the pursuit of power, and where the most profound and destructive decisions were often made in the darkest, most private corners of the empire, far from the applause of the crowd or the judgment of history. This shadow world, always lurking beneath the gleaming surface of Roman glory, serves as a stark reminder of the often brutal and uncompromising reality of unchecked power. A reality that, in its essence, remains hauntingly familiar. Now, let's peel back yet another layer of Rome, moving past the grand public markets, the bustling forum, and the official shops. to descend into the grimy, illicit world of the black market and hidden trade. You, a Roman, would quickly learn that not everything you needed or deeply desired could be acquired through legitimate means. When the state imposed taxes, bans, or simply couldn't provide, or when your desires were too transgressive for public consumption, you turned to the shadows. This was a world of hushed transactions, dangerous liaisons, and a pervasive sense of illegality that permeated the city's hidden corners, a stark contrast to the ordered commerce of the daylight world. Imagine yourself navigating the labyrinthine back alleys of Subura, Rome's notoriously crowded and impoverished district, or perhaps slipping into the darkened corners of a seaport warehouse in Ostia late at night. The air here isn't perfumed with incense or the aroma of freshly baked bread. Instead, it's thick with the smell of stale urine, decaying refuse, cheap wine, and the pungent sweat of desperate people. The sounds are hushed, furtive whispers, the clinking of coins exchanged quickly, the nervous shuffle of feet. This is where you come when you need something that is either forbidden, stolen, or simply unavailable through official channels. Let's talk about contraband. The vast Roman Empire, with its extensive borders, was ripe for smuggling. Goods from distant lands, taxed heavily or entirely banned, found their way into Rome through illicit channels. Imagine a luxurious silk robe from China, its threads shimmering with a forbidden sheen, its price astronomical due to official tariffs. You, a wealthy matron seeking to outshine your rivals, or a patrician looking for a unique gift for a courtesan, wouldn't go to the official port. Instead, you'd send a trusted slave or freedman to a clandestine meeting. Picture the scene. In a dimly lit tavern, far from the main roads, you might encounter a shifty-eyed merchant. His cloak pulled tight, his face obscured. He reveals a hidden compartment in his cart, or gestures to a locked chest. Inside, bundles of precious spices, exotic animal pelts, or finely crafted jewelry, all smuggled past customs officials, are displayed. The price is exorbitant, but the allure of the forbidden, the exclusivity of acquiring something no one else has, is too strong to resist. The transaction is quick, the coins exchanged with a nervous swiftness, and then you melt back into the shadows carrying your illicit treasure. The thrill of the illicit acquisition, the danger involved, only enhances the value of the goods. Gambling, too, flourished in the shadows. While some forms of dice games were tolerated, serious gambling, especially for high stakes, was often frowned upon or outright illegal. Yet, the human craving for risk, for the thrill of chance, was irrepressible. You'd find secret gambling dens tucked away in the back rooms of taverns behind false walls, or in the private chambers of wealthy citizens who hosted clandestine dice games. Imagine the scene: a smoky room, lit by sputtering oil lamps, the air thick with tension and the clatter of ivory dice. Men, and sometimes women, of all social strata gather around a worn table. Their faces are grim, their eyes fixed on the rolling dice, their fortunes rising and falling with each throw. Cheating is rampant, the stakes are high, and arguments often escalate into brawls, sometimes involving daggers. Debts incurred in these games, being illegal, could not be collected through official channels, leading to private violence, intimidation, and ruin. You might see a man lose his entire fortune, his house, even his freedom, all in the space of a few rolls of the dice, his despair a silent, chilling spectacle observed only by his fellow gamblers and the wary proprietors of the illicit den. The desperation, the adrenaline, the hope for an impossible win. These emotions charged the air, far from the controlled environment of legal entertainment, prostitution. While openly tolerated and even regulated in designated brothels, lupanaria also had its more hidden, darker aspects. Beyond the public-facing establishments, a vast network of unregistered prostitutes operated in the shadows. Women and men, often slaves or freed persons selling their bodies in secluded alleyways, private rooms, or as part of illicit social gatherings. A respectable citizen seeking discreet encounters to protect his public reputation would never be seen entering a lupanar. Instead, he might arrange a meeting with a courtesan in a private villa or stumble upon an unregistered prostitute in a darkened corner of the city. These encounters were often more dangerous, less regulated, and offered little protection to the individuals involved, particularly the prostitutes themselves, who operated in a constant state of vulnerability and exploitation, far from the supposed safety of official oversight. Then there was the dark side of usury, lending money at exorbitant interest rates. While money lending was a legitimate profession, unscrupulous lenders operating outside the law preyed on the desperate. Imagine a small shopkeeper, his business failing, or a farmer whose crop has been ruined by a storm. He needs money quickly, but official lenders demand collateral he doesn't have. He turns to a loan shark, a shadowy figure operating from a back room, known for his ruthless collection methods. The interest rates are crippling, often exceeding legal limits. When the borrower inevitably defaults, the loan shark's private enforcers, often burly slaves or ex-gladiators, arrive in the dead of night. Debts were settled not in court, but through intimidation, violence, or by forcing the debtor into servitude. You might witness a family being thrown out of their home in the dark, their possessions seized, their lives ruined by the unseen hand of an illicit moneylender, a grim spectacle far from the public pronouncements of Roman justice. Stolen goods formed another significant part of the black market. Rome, a city of immense wealth and immense poverty, was a magnet for thieves. From the grand domus of a patrician to the cramped insula of a plebeian, property was constantly being pilfered. Where did these stolen goods go? Not to the official markets. Instead, they found their way to fences, who operated in the back rooms of taverns or from inconspicuous stalls in obscure marketplaces. You might be offered a ring, a piece of jewelry, a fine bronze statue, or even a toga at a suspiciously low price. You knew intuitively that these items were likely stolen, but the bargain was too good to pass up. The transaction was swift, secretive, a quiet complicity in the crime, benefiting from someone else's loss. Far from the watchful eyes of the vigiles, Rome's urban police force, who were often too few and too corrupt to enforce order effectively in these hidden corners. Food, too, could be a black market commodity, especially during times of scarcity or famine. While the state provided grain distributions, they were not always sufficient or consistent. Desperate citizens would turn to illicit dealers, paying inflated prices for hoarded grain, smuggled foodstuffs, or even diseased meat. These were matters of survival, where morality took a back seat to the primal need to feed your family. You might witness a quiet exchange in a darkened alley, a woman nervously handing over her last coin for a meager sack of grain, her eyes darting nervously, fearing discovery, fearing being cheated, fearing starvation. This underbelly of Roman commerce, operating unseen and unacknowledged by the official state, provided essential services and fulfilled desires that the official system could not or would not. It was a world of opportunists, criminals, and desperate individuals, all operating in the shadows, fueled by greed, necessity, and the enduring human desire for the forbidden. It was a reflection of the profound inequalities within Roman society, a place where the powerful could indulge their vices discreetly, and the poor could find means of survival, however precarious. When no one was watching, the elegant facade of Roman order gave way to a far messier, more dangerous and utterly captivating reality, a constant reminder that even in the most organized of empires, chaos and illicit desires always find a way to flourish, adapting to the shadows, always present beneath the gleaming surface. And it's in these quiet, dangerous transactions that you truly feel the pulse of a society wrestling with its own contradictions. its own moral compromises a society far more complex and human than the idealized images often portray. Tonight, we venture into the most intimate and often hypocritical arena of Roman life, their private sexual worlds. Forget the public pronouncements of virtue, the ideal of the chaste matron, or the controlled male citizen. We're going behind closed doors, into secluded chambers, and into the whispered secrets where love, lust, and lies intertwined in a complex dance, largely unseen and unacknowledged by the public eye. You, with your modern understanding of sexual freedom and evolving social norms, would find the Roman landscape of desire a baffling mix of surprising permissiveness and rigid social control, often applied unequally based on gender and status. Let's begin with the Roman male, particularly a citizen of standing. Publicly, he was expected to be a family man, a paterfamilias dedicated to his wife and children, upholding the traditional Roman values of pietas and virtus. Privately, however, his sexual desires were afforded considerable latitude, provided they did not infringe upon the honor of another male citizen's family. Imagine him, outwardly stoic and respectable, but inwardly harboring a spectrum of desires. He might have a wife whose primary role was to produce legitimate heirs. Their sexual relationship, while sanctioned, was often viewed more as a duty than a source of passionate pleasure, at least from the male perspective. So where did a Roman man seek pleasure or passionate love away from his wife's bed and the public gaze? He had options. He might visit a lupanar, a brothel, often a dimly lit, noisy establishment located in a less respectable part of the city. While technically public, his visits would likely be discreet, undertaken under the cover of night, perhaps with a slave or freedman accompanying him to maintain appearances. Inside, the brothel was a world apart, a place where social distinctions blurred and desires could be openly expressed. You might see graffiti on the walls depicting sexual acts, hear the raucous laughter of patrons, and smell the heady mix of cheap wine, perfume, and human bodies. The women, and sometimes men who worked there, were often slaves or freed women, their bodies a commodity, their lives a testament to the harsh realities of Roman society. He could choose from a menu of options, satisfying desires that he dared not express in his respectable home. His visit was a private transaction, a momentary release, safely segregated from his public life. But a Roman man might also seek out a meretrix, a high-class courtesan, often a highly educated and cultivated woman, who operated from a private residence. These were not the common streetwalkers. They were companions, often entertaining clients with music, poetry, and witty conversation before retiring to more intimate settings. These relationships were often more complex, sometimes involving genuine affection, but always existing outside the bounds of marriage. Imagine a senator discreetly visiting such a woman, perhaps in a quiet villa on the outskirts of Rome. Their conversations might range from politics to philosophy before turning to more personal matters. The courtesan offered companionship, intellectual stimulation, and sexual pleasure, all in a private, luxurious setting, providing an escape from the formalities of his marriage. These were secret relationships, carefully guarded from public knowledge, particularly by the man, to protect his reputation and his family's honor. Adultery, for a Roman male, was often tolerated as long as it was discreet and did not involve another Roman citizen's wife or unmarried daughter. Sleeping with a slave, a freed woman, or a prostitute was not considered adultery in the legal sense. But if a man was caught with another citizen's wife, particularly by the cuckolded husband, the consequences could be severe, ranging from a beating to, in some extreme cases, death at the husband's hand, if done in flagrante delicto. These encounters were therefore conducted with extreme caution, often in private houses away from watchful eyes, with elaborate precautions taken to avoid discovery. The thrill of the forbidden, combined with the severe risks, must have created an intense, dangerous dynamic around such liaisons. For Roman women, the sexual landscape was far more restrictive, and the consequences of transgression far more brutal. A Roman matron was expected to be chaste, faithful, and focused solely on her domestic duties and the production of heirs. Her sexuality was, for all intents and purposes, considered property of her husband, to be controlled and managed for the family's honor. If a Roman wife was caught in adultery, especially after Augustus's moral legislation, the consequences could be devastating: divorce, loss of dowry, banishment, and public shaming. Yet, human desire is not so easily suppressed by legal codes. When no one was watching, when the husband was away on campaign or absorbed in public duties, a Roman matron might seek out her own illicit pleasures. Imagine a wealthy Roman wife, perhaps married to an older, less attentive husband, finding herself drawn to a younger, more vibrant man. Their affair would be a masterpiece of deception. Secret notes passed through trusted slaves, clandestine meetings in secluded gardens, or hurried encounters in quiet corners of baths or private homes. The risk for her was immense, far greater than for her male counterpart. Discovery meant ruin, not just for herself, but for her entire family, tarnishing their honor. The secrecy surrounding such affairs, the constant fear of exposure, the thrill of the forbidden. These elements imbued such encounters with a powerful, dangerous intensity. She might use aphrodisiacs or love charms acquired from a private venefica to try and secure her lover's affections or to spice up her own desire, all performed in the deepest secrecy. Same-sex relationships, while not always publicly condemned in the same way as adultery with a citizen's wife, were also often conducted privately, particularly for those in positions of power. For men, a relationship with a younger, passive male, especially a slave or a prostitute, was often tolerated, even if not openly celebrated. The key was the active-passive dynamic, with the citizen male maintaining the dominant role. But for two citizen males to engage in a mutually reciprocal relationship, particularly if one was perceived as being effeminate or submissive, could lead to social ridicule or even legal repercussions in some contexts. Therefore, many such relationships unfolded in the privacy of personal homes, away from public judgment. Imagine two male citizens sharing a deep, intimate bond, their affection expressed in the quiet of a shared room, their relationship a secret known only to a trusted few. A defiance of certain societal expectations. For women, same-sex relationships are less well documented, often erased from the male-dominated historical narrative. However, hints exist of deep female friendships and bonds that may have transcended the platonic. In the secluded women's quarters of wealthy homes, or in social circles largely dominated by women, it is plausible that intimate relationships could have blossomed, entirely hidden from the male gaze and official discourse. These would have been secrets guarded with extreme care, expressions of love and desire that dared not speak their name in public. Existing in the quiet, unobserved corners of female lives, even within the context of family, there were unspoken secrets. Incest, while a profound taboo, was not entirely unheard of, particularly within powerful families where the lines of succession and property often led to complex and sometimes morally ambiguous relationships. These acts, if they occurred, would be shrouded in the deepest secrecy, a dark secret that could destroy a family's reputation if ever brought to light. The whispers of such transgressions, often just rumors or accusations, were enough to cast a long, chilling shadow over entire dynasties. The use of contraception and abortion, while often frowned upon or dangerous, also existed in the private sphere. Ancient texts describe various methods, from herbal concoctions to magical amulets. When an unwanted pregnancy occurred, particularly for an unmarried woman or a wife who feared her husband's wrath, she might seek out a midwife or a specialist known for their discreet services, often at great risk to her own health and life. These desperate acts, performed in hushed tones behind closed doors, highlight the profound lack of control women had over their own bodies and the lengths they would go to in order to avoid social ruin. The shame, the fear, the physical pain, and the moral quandary of these choices were burdens carried in solitude, far from the public discourse on family and childbirth. Ultimately, the private sexual lives of Romans were a testament to the enduring power of human desire to find expression. Even in the face of rigid social structures and severe penalties, it was a world of public performance and private transgression, where honesty was often sacrificed for reputation, and where the most intense emotions, be they love, lust, or despair, unfolded in the hidden corners of human existence. When no one was watching, Romans, like people in every age, pursued their desires, navigated their affections, and grappled with the complex interplay of their bodies and souls. Often in secrecy, often at great risk, creating a mosaic of human experience far richer and more complicated than the official histories dared to record. This hidden sexual landscape reminds you that underneath the grand edifice of empire, human hearts beat with the same complicated rhythms of longing and forbidden passion that resonate even in your own world, albeit in vastly different contexts. Tonight, we delve into one of the darkest, most profoundly unsettling corners of Roman private life, the grim reality of unwanted children, the lack of effective contraception, and the brutal choices mothers and fathers faced when no one was watching, and the silent screams of the exposed went unheard. You, in your modern world of medical advancements and social safety nets, might find this aspect of Roman society almost incomprehensible, a stark and brutal testament to the precariousness of life and the cold calculus of survival in the ancient world. Imagine yourself a Roman woman living in an insula or a modest domus. You are married perhaps, or perhaps you are a slave or a freed woman struggling to make ends meet. Pregnancy is a constant threat, and unlike today, there are no reliable, readily available methods of contraception. While some ancient texts mention herbal remedies or magical amulets, their effectiveness was dubious at best. Childbirth itself is a perilous journey, often ending in the death of mother or child or both. But even if you survive childbirth, the struggle is far from over. Now picture the scene immediately after birth. The baby is delivered perhaps by a midwife in the privacy of your home. It's a tiny, fragile human being, but its fate is not immediately secure. In Roman society, the decision of whether a newborn would live or die rested not with the mother, but primarily with the paterfamilias and the male head of the household. This was his right, his legal prerogative. The newborn would be laid at his feet, and if he picked it up, he acknowledged it as his own, and it would be raised. If he turned away, or more tellingly, if he ordered its exposure, the baby was doomed. This wasn't an act of murder in the Roman legal sense, it was considered abandonment. And it happened frequently, a silent, almost routine practice that shaped the demographics and emotional landscape of Roman families. But why? The reasons were many and often desperate. Perhaps the family already had too many mouths to feed, and another child would push them into destitution. Perhaps the child was physically deformed or sickly, seen as a bad omen or a drain on resources. Perhaps it was a girl, and the family already had daughters and now needed a son to carry on the family name and ensure its future. Or perhaps, most tragically, the child was illegitimate, the product of an illicit affair, and its existence would bring shame and ruin upon the family, particularly the mother. Imagine the quiet desperation of the mother, her body still aching from childbirth, as she watches her husband make this agonizing decision. Her heart might be breaking, but her power to intervene is minimal or non-existent. She might plead, she might cry, but ultimately the choice is his. If the decision is made to expose the child, the act itself is often carried out in secret, away from the public gaze, a private act of family desperation. The methods were chillingly simple and brutal. The infant, wrapped in swaddling clothes, would be carried by a slave or a trusted family member under the cloak of darkness to a desolate spot. It might be a remote roadside, a dung heap outside the city walls, or a riverbank. The infant would be left there, exposed to the elements, to hunger, to wild animals, or to the remote chance of being found by someone willing to take it in. The goal was for it to die quietly, unobserved, and for its existence to be forgotten. Imagine the chill of the night air on your skin, the oppressive silence broken only by the whimpering of the child, and the agonizing guilt that would haunt you for the rest of your days if you were the one forced to carry out such an act. The cold moon would be your only witness, its pale light illuminating a tragedy that no one else was meant to see. For some, particularly if the family wanted to ensure the child's quick demise to spare its suffering, drowning was also an option, a swift, silent end performed away from witnesses. These were the moments when the veneer of Roman civilization cracked, revealing the harsh, uncompromising realities of life in an era without adequate social services or medical knowledge. The emotional toll on the mother, even if she outwardly accepted the decision, must have been immense. To carry a child for 9 months, to endure the pains of childbirth, only to have that child discarded like refuse, the trauma would be a silent scream within her soul, a grief that could never be publicly expressed. She could not mourn openly. For a child that was never officially acknowledged, a life that was erased from the family record. This quiet, private suffering speaks volumes about the psychological burdens placed upon Roman women, burdens largely invisible to history. Sometimes, though rarely, exposed infants were rescued. These foundlings might be taken in by childless couples, adopted by compassionate individuals, or more often taken by those who saw an opportunity for profit. These rescued children might be raised as slaves or trained as beggars, prostitutes, or gladiators. So the act of exposure, while intended to solve one problem, often created another, pushing the child into a life of servitude and hardship, a life that would also unfold largely unseen by the mainstream of Roman society. You might walk past such a foundling, now a street beggar with empty eyes, and wonder about their origins, their story, a silent testament to the hidden tragedies that dotted the Roman urban landscape. The lack of options for women also contributed to this practice. Divorce was possible, but often left women in a precarious economic position, especially if they didn't have a wealthy family to return to. Without the ability to earn an independent living, and with societal pressure to marry and bear children, women had few choices when facing an unwanted pregnancy or an already overwhelming family. The decision to expose a child was not a casual one, but often a desperate measure born of profound economic hardship, fear of social disgrace, or the absolute power of the paterfamilias. The very silence surrounding this practice speaks volumes. It was rarely discussed openly in public discourse, considered a private family matter. There were no public protests against it, no widespread moral outcry, because it was an accepted, if grim, part of the social fabric. It reveals a chilling aspect of Roman values, where the concept of personhood and the value of a life were often tied to one's social standing, usefulness, and the will of the male head of the family. The inherent vulnerability of infants and the immense power wielded by the paterfamilias combined to create a system where such silent tragedies were commonplace. When you consider the vastness of the Roman Empire, its grand achievements, its legal codes, its philosophical thought, it is easy to overlook these profoundly human, profoundly brutal realities that unfolded in the unobserved corners of its domestic life. The silent screams of the exposed, the quiet despair of the mothers, the agonizing decisions of the fathers. These were the hidden costs of a society that valued tradition, family honor, and economic survival above the sanctity of every individual life, particularly those deemed unwanted. It's a stark reminder that beneath the veneer of civilization, humanity grapples with its most primal urges and its most difficult choices, often in the deepest, most terrifying privacy, leaving you with a profound sense of the often unseen suffering that underpinned the Roman world. Tonight, we take a rather less glamorous, more pungent journey into the unobserved realities of Roman life, the pervasive filth, the constant battle against waste, and the inescapable stench that characterized daily existence when no one was watching, or perhaps when everyone was simply accustomed to it. You, with your advanced sanitation systems, your daily refuse collection, and your clean, paved streets, would find the Roman urban environment an utterly overwhelming assault on your senses, a vivid illustration of how deeply our modern comforts have removed us from the raw, gritty reality of human waste. Imagine stepping out of your cozy modern home. The street is clean, the air fresh, the waste bins discreetly tucked away. Now transport yourself to the narrow, crowded streets of ancient Rome, particularly in a bustling district like the Suburra. Your feet, not encased in pristine sneakers, but perhaps in simple sandals, immediately meet a surface that is anything but clean. The street is a chaotic mix of compacted dirt, uneven paving stones, and a thick, pervasive layer of grime. Animal droppings from horses, donkeys, dogs are everywhere, mingling with discarded food scraps, rotting vegetables, and various other forms of organic waste. The drains, where they exist, are often open, allowing you to glimpse the murky, foul-smelling water that flows sluggishly within them, carrying untold amounts of refuse. But the most potent and unavoidable contributor to the street's squalor comes directly from the private dwellings themselves. As we discussed earlier, chamber pots were ubiquitous in Roman homes, especially in the multi-story insulae, where most of the urban population lived. And when those pots were full, particularly from the upper floors, their contents were frequently, and quite unceremoniously, dumped out of the windows into the street below. Imagine walking along trying to avoid the mud and the animal waste, only to have a sudden, nauseating splash land near you, or worse, directly on you. The shout of "Cave! Beware!" was meant to serve as a warning, but often came too late. This wasn't an occasional mishap. It was a daily accepted practice. The narrow streets, already teeming with people, animals, and refuse, became open sewers, accumulating layers of human excrement. The thought alone is enough to turn your stomach, but for a Roman it was simply the reality of urban life, a constant olfactory backdrop to their existence. The stench, dear listener, would be an inescapable, overwhelming presence. It wasn't just one smell, it was a symphony of foul odors. The pungent ammonia from urine, the acrid tang of human and animal feces, the sweet, cloying decay of rotting food, the smoky haze from charcoal braziers, and the general pervasive smell of unwashed bodies. Your modern nose, accustomed to deodorizers and air fresheners, would be constantly assailed, your senses overwhelmed to the point of nausea. Romans, through sheer exposure, would have developed a far higher tolerance, but even they must have recoiled from the most egregious concentrations of filth. The elegant perfumes worn by the wealthy served not just as a status symbol, but as a desperately needed personal shield against the relentless onslaught of foul odors. The reality of chronic illness was also profoundly different. Without modern medication for conditions like diabetes, heart disease, or chronic pain, you would simply suffer. Life expectancy was far lower than today, and many maladies that are easily treatable now were death sentences then. You might experience a slow, agonizing decline, your body wasting away, your family watching helplessly, offering what little comfort they could, but ultimately powerless against the forces of disease. The fear of contagion, too, was a constant private terror. If a family member contracted a highly infectious disease, the entire household would live in dread, knowing that it could quickly spread, leading to a silent, private epidemic within your own walls. The psychological impact of Roman medicine, or the lack thereof, on your private life would be profound. You lived with a heightened awareness of your own mortality, a constant dread of illness, and a deep skepticism about the effectiveness of treatments. Every ache, every cough, every cut carried a weight of potential fatality. The concept of prevention beyond basic hygiene and diet was poorly understood. You simply hoped for good fortune, prayed to the gods for health, and endured the inevitable illnesses with stoicism or despair. When no one was watching, when the grandeur of the Roman Empire was far removed from your suffering, you grappled with the raw, visceral reality of your own body. You faced pain, disease, and the ever-present shadow of death with a courage born of necessity, or with a quiet resignation. The doctor's private chamber, or your own sickbed, revealed the fragility of human life in an era where medical science was still in its infancy. A stark reminder that beneath the veneer of powerful empire, individuals still battled fundamental biological realities, alone and often without hope, leaving you with a profound appreciation for the miraculous advancements that have transformed your own experience of health and illness. The silent suffering endured in those private rooms underscores the incredible, unseen burdens carried by countless Romans, a stark, uncomfortable truth that truly brings their world to life. Tonight, we step beyond the public display of Roman wealth, the grand forums, the lavish public games, the triumphal arches, and into the hidden sanctuaries of extreme opulence and private decadence, where the truly rich indulged their most extravagant desires, when no one but their carefully selected inner circle or discreet slaves were watching. You, accustomed to the concept of luxury, might imagine Roman excess, but you'd be unprepared for the scale of hidden spending, the bizarre tastes, and the often brutal exploitation that underpinned this unparalleled private indulgence. This is the dark side of wealth, revealed in its most unbridled form. Imagine yourself a member of Rome's ultra-elite, a senator, an emperor, or a fabulously wealthy freedman. Your public domus might be impressive, but it's merely a facade. Your true sanctuary, your private kingdom of excess, is your sprawling villa, often located on the Bay of Naples or nestled in the serene hills of Tivoli, far from the prying eyes and clamor of the city. As you approach, the imposing walls give way to carefully manicured gardens, not wild and natural, but sculpted, geometric, a testament to man's domination over nature. Hidden within these gardens are not just statues, but intricate grottos, artificial lakes, and elaborate fountains, their water systems requiring immense engineering and a small army of slaves to maintain. But it's inside the villa, in its most private chambers, that true decadence unfurled. Forget your modern concept of fine dining. A private Roman banquet held for a select few could be a spectacle of extreme culinary excess and bizarre tastes. Imagine reclining on a couch, your slaves silently bringing forth dish after dish, each more extravagant than the last. We're not talking about simple delicacies. Picture platters of nightingale tongues, considered an extreme luxury, or flamingo brains, painstakingly harvested for their rarity. Think of dormice fattened in special cages, then roasted and stuffed with spices, or even sow's udders, a strange delicacy. These weren't just meals, they were performances, a grotesque display of wealth designed to shock and impress your chosen guests, all in the privacy of your dining room, where the public rules of frugalitas, frugality, could be utterly ignored. The wine, of course, flowed freely, often from ancient vintages, stored in massive amphorae, perhaps even chilled with snow brought down from the mountains by fast runners. You would drink from exquisite silver or gold goblets, sometimes encrusted with precious gems, each sip a testament to your immense resources. The conversation might turn to philosophy, poetry, or scandalous gossip, all in an atmosphere designed for unbridled pleasure and intellectual showmanship. And after the feast, the entertainment might continue, not just dancers or musicians, but perhaps a private theatrical performance mocking political rivals, or a display of exotic animals brought from distant lands, all staged for your private amusement. These were experiences that few Romans would ever witness, a secret world of sensory overload designed to satiate the most jaded palate. The art and decor of these private spaces also spoke volumes. While public art might depict mythological scenes or political triumphs, within the private chambers of your villa, frescoes and mosaics might display far more explicit or sensual themes, catering to your personal tastes without fear of public censure. Erotic art, explicit imagery, or even depictions of forbidden cults could adorn your private rooms, creating an atmosphere of uninhibited personal expression, far from the moralizing eyes of society. You would collect exotic treasures from the farthest reaches of the empire, rare gems, ancient Egyptian artifacts, intricate bronzes from Greece, displaying them not to the public, but to your most intimate and admiring guests, showcasing a personal empire of taste and acquisition. But this extreme luxury had a profoundly dark side, largely hidden from view. The vast majority of Roman wealth was built on conquest and slavery. Your lavish villa, your exquisite banquets, your exotic art, all of it was funded by the exploitation of countless human beings. The silent army of slaves who maintained your villa, prepared your food, served your guests, and attended to your every whim, lived in cramped, often brutal conditions, far from the luxury they created. They were the unseen foundation of your wealth, their suffering the hidden cost of your opulence. Imagine the mining operations, for example, far from Rome, in distant provinces like Spain or Dacia. Thousands of slaves, condemned prisoners, and conquered peoples toiled in horrific conditions, deep underground extracting the silver, gold, and iron that flowed back to Rome to fund its empire and its elites' private excesses. The air was thick with dust, the work backbreaking, the dangers immense. Many died young, their lives sacrificed for the precious metals that adorned your private goblets and financed your lavish parties. These were unseen horrors occurring far from your beautiful gardens, but their products fueled your entire lifestyle. Similarly, the agricultural estates that fed your vast household and generated immense profits were worked by legions of slaves, often chained, forced to labor from dawn till dusk under the brutal supervision of overseers. Their lives were short, harsh, and utterly devoid of personal freedom. The rich wines you drank, the exotic fruits you savored, all were cultivated through their sweat and tears, a silent, unseen testament to their perpetual bondage, even within your villa. The management of wealth and resources had its hidden aspects. Tax evasion, for example, was a private art practiced by many of the wealthy. Creative accounting, hidden assets, and bribing officials were common practices to avoid contributing your full share to the public coffers. These were not public declarations, but discreet financial maneuvers, conducted in the private offices of your domus, ensuring that more wealth remained in your personal control. The concept of a private treasure hoard also speaks to this hidden wealth. While publicly Romans might invest in land or commerce, many also accumulated vast stores of precious metals, gems and artifacts in private vaults or buried caches, away from the prying eyes of tax collectors or potential rivals. These hidden stashes represented a personal security, a quiet assertion of wealth that transcended public display, a secret reserve of power. This hidden world of extreme luxury and decadence, fueled by vast wealth and often brutal exploitation, reveals a profound hypocrisy at the heart of Roman society. Publicly, there was an emphasis on duty, moderation, and civic virtue. Privately, for the ultra-rich, there was an almost limitless indulgence in pleasure, extravagance, and the bizarre, all shielded from the judgment of the masses. When no one was watching, the masks came off, and the truly powerful allowed themselves to revel in their accumulated riches, often without a second thought for the human cost of their opulent lifestyle. It's a sobering reminder that beneath the grandeur of Roman civilization lay a complex web of moral compromises and hidden brutalities, a testament to the enduring human capacity for both immense creation and immense cruelty, leaving you with a chilling understanding of how power and wealth can distort reality in the quiet, unobserved corners of even the most sophisticated societies. Tonight, we leave the marble halls of Rome and the private villas of the elite and journey to the distant frontiers of the empire into the rough and tumble world of the Roman legionary. You, the modern observer, might primarily associate Roman soldiers with disciplined ranks, gleaming armor, and glorious conquests. But when no one was watching, when the centurion's sharp eye was elsewhere, or when the legion was in garrison for months on end, what did these hardened warriors do? We're delving into the private desires, the small indulgences, and the often brutal realities of a soldier's life away from the battlefield, in the grimy, unobserved corners of the Roman military machine. Imagine yourself a legionary, perhaps stationed in a bleak frontier fort along Hadrian's Wall, or in a bustling garrison town in the Middle East. Your life is one of harsh discipline, constant training, and the ever-present threat of combat. But it's also a life of immense boredom, isolation, and physical deprivation. The days are long, filled with drills, building roads, digging trenches, or repairing fortifications. Your uniform is heavy, your armor chafes, and the food, while regular, is monotonous. Grain, hardtack, dried meat. You miss your family, your village, the familiar sights and sounds of home. A profound and constant ache that gnaws at you in the quiet moments. When you're not actively campaigning, your life revolves around the castra, the military camp or fort. These were highly organized miniature cities, but they also had their unobserved nooks and crannies. After a long day, when the formal duties are done and the officers have retired, the soldiers seek solace and release. Drinking, of course, was paramount. Imagine yourself gathered with your contubernium, your tent mates, your closest companions, in a small, smoky tavern just outside the fort walls, or perhaps in the relative privacy of your barrack room. The wine is rough, often watered down, but it serves its purpose. You drink to forget the day's hardships, to numb the ache of loneliness, to quiet the fear of impending battle. The air is thick with the smell of cheap wine, unwashed bodies, and tobacco, if any local equivalents were available, though more likely pungent herbs. The conversation flows freely, boasts of past glories, complaints about officers, crude jokes, and the shared camaraderie of men facing a common fate. Arguments often broke out, fueled by drink, sometimes escalating into brawls with fists or even daggers, quickly suppressed by a patrolling optio, but moments of unbridled, aggressive release. Gambling was another pervasive pastime, a way to inject a thrill into the monotonous garrison life. You'd gather in the corners of the barracks or in a back room of a tavern, rolling dice on a worn board, playing for meager stakes or, for the more reckless, for a month's pay or even personal possessions. The tension in the air would be palpable, the hopes and fears of these men laid bare with each throw of the dice. Some would lose everything, their despair a silent spectacle, a stark reminder of the precariousness of their lives. These games, often officially discouraged or outright banned, flourished in the shadows, a defiant assertion of personal freedom in a highly regulated existence. Prostitution, too, was an undeniable part of a soldier's life. With long periods away from home and often explicitly forbidden from marrying, though many entered into unofficial relationships, soldiers sought out comfort and release wherever they could find it. Brothels often sprang up around military camps, catering specifically to the needs of the legionaries. These were not glamorous establishments. They were often rough, squalid places run by camp followers or local women, where transactions were quick and brutal. Imagine a soldier, his heart heavy with loneliness, his body aching, spending his meager pay on a brief, impersonal encounter, a fleeting moment of physical comfort in a life otherwise devoid of intimacy. These were purely transactional encounters, occurring in dimly lit, cramped rooms, far from any romantic ideal. A raw testament to basic human needs in the absence of genuine connection. Many soldiers, despite official bans, formed unofficial relationships with local women or even with male camp followers. These were often long-term, stable relationships, offering companionship and a semblance of domesticity. Children might be born from these unions, though they would not be considered legitimate Roman citizens, and the soldier could not officially acknowledge them. These were secret families, created in the shadow of military regulations, offering a quiet refuge from the harsh realities of military life. Imagine a soldier stealing away from the camp after dark, risking punishment, to spend a few precious hours with his unofficial wife and children in a small, rented room outside the fort, a stolen moment of human connection that kept his spirit alive. Violence, too, could take on a different, more private character away from the battlefield. Intra-squad disputes, rivalries, or acts of bullying often happened when officers were not observing. A weaker soldier might be targeted, his suffering a silent part of barrack life. Or perhaps when the pressure of constant discipline and the horrors of combat became too much, a soldier might lash out in a moment of unbridled rage. A private act of desperate violence against a perceived injustice or another soldier. These were the grim, unacknowledged realities of men living in close quarters, under extreme stress, with little recourse for emotional release beyond aggression or self-destruction. The emotional toll of military life, too, unfolded largely unseen. The fear of battle, the trauma of seeing comrades die, the constant vigilance, these anxieties gnawed at the soldiers' minds. There was little concept of psychological support or therapy. Instead, soldiers found their own ways to cope. Through shared humor, through the stoicism instilled by military training, or through the solace of alcohol. Many carried unspoken burdens, internal scars that would haunt them for the rest of their lives, leading to quiet suffering, nightmares, or sudden bursts of irrational anger. These were the hidden costs of empire, paid in the unseen struggles of individual men. Even death had a different character away from the public gaze of Roman funeral rites. When a soldier died on campaign, his body might be hastily buried in a shallow grave, his personal possessions claimed by his comrades or left to rot. There was no grand ceremony, no public mourning. Instead, his friends, his contubernium, might offer a quiet, private eulogy, a silent remembrance over his unmarked grave, a final act of camaraderie and grief in the vast, indifferent wilderness of the frontier. The private desires and struggles of the Roman soldier reveal a profound humanity beneath the uniform and discipline. These were men, often far from home, facing immense hardship, clinging to small pleasures, forging deep bonds of brotherhood, and grappling with fear, loneliness, and the grim realities of their profession. When no one was watching, the Roman soldier sought escape, connection, and solace in the fleeting moments of personal freedom available to him, reminding you that even in the most organized and formidable military machine, the individual human spirit, with all its needs and weaknesses, constantly sought expression, often in the grimy, unseen corners of the empire, far from the glory of the parade ground. It's a testament to the enduring human spirit that finds ways to cope, to connect, and to assert its individuality, even in the harshest and most dehumanizing of circumstances. Tonight, our journey into the unobserved corners of Roman life brings us to the most universal and profoundly private human experience: death. While the grand public funerals of emperors and senators were elaborate affairs designed to project power and lineage, the vast majority of Romans faced death in a much more intimate, often terrifying and deeply personal way, when no one but their closest family and trusted few were watching. You, in your modern world of hospices, Funeral homes and professional grief counseling would find the Roman approach to death a raw, visceral encounter steeped in superstition, fear, and deeply ingrained tradition, largely unfolding in the hushed solemnity of the private home. Imagine yourself a Roman. Death is a constant, tangible presence. Infant mortality is high, plagues sweep through the city, and life expectancy is dramatically shorter than what you know. You've likely witnessed countless deaths within your family, among your neighbors, even among your own children. The fear of death, and particularly the fear of dying an unmourned or improperly buried death, is a pervasive private terror. When a family member breathes their last in your home, the immediate aftermath is a flurry of private rituals. The first act is often the conclamatio, a ritualized wailing and calling of the deceased's name, sometimes for hours, performed by the women of the family. This isn't just an outburst of grief. It's a vital act, believed to ensure that the spirit doesn't linger too long or wander aimlessly. The cries, while echoing within the family home, are largely confined there, a private outpouring of sorrow. Next comes the meticulous preparation of the body, a solemn duty performed by the women of the household, or by professional pollinctors if the family could afford them. The body is washed, anointed with fragrant oils and perfumes to mask the inevitable odors of decay, and dressed in its finest clothes, often the toga for a male citizen or a stola for a matron. A coin, typically an obol, is placed in the mouth or on the eyes, a private offering for Charon, the ferryman of the underworld, to ensure safe passage across the river Styx. Without this, the soul risked eternal wandering, a terrifying prospect. These are quiet, respectful acts performed with immense care, imbued with both love and a profound sense of duty, all unfolding behind closed doors, away from the prying eyes of the street. The vigil then begins. For several days, the deceased lies in state within the atrium of the family home, or in a quieter, more private chamber, usually adorned with flowers and candles. This is a period of intense private mourning. Family members, particularly women, sit by the body, offering prayers, lamenting their loss, and silently guarding against evil spirits or desecration. Slaves might also participate, offering their respects to a deceased master or mistress, or mourning a fellow slave in hushed tones. The house itself is marked by cypress branches at the door, a private sign of death that warns visitors to keep away, respecting the family's grief and avoiding ritual pollution. The sounds in the house are hushed, tears flow freely, and the heavy atmosphere of loss permeates every corner. There's no external distraction, no immediate return to daily routines. The family is absorbed entirely in their private sorrow. The emotional toll of this intimate proximity to the deceased, often for several days, must have been immense. To see the familiar face of a loved one slowly succumb to the processes of decay, to smell the changing scents, to feel the coldness of their skin. These were visceral encounters with the finality of death. You, the mourner, would sit with your grief, reflecting on the life that was and grappling with the profound emptiness left behind, a grief that was deeply personal and often unshared beyond your immediate family. The fear of what lay beyond, the uncertainty of the afterlife, would also weigh heavily on your mind, fueling private prayers for the deceased's peaceful journey. The disposal of possessions, too, had its private aspects. While some items might be included in the tomb, many personal effects would be carefully sorted. Beloved items might be kept as private mementos hidden away from the public eye. Others deemed ritually impure or simply unwanted might be quietly discarded or even burned in a private ceremony, ensuring their essence didn't linger or cause misfortune. These acts of sorting and disposal, performed in the quiet privacy of the home, represented a final severing of ties, a practical yet emotionally charged process of letting go. For the vast majority of Romans, particularly the poor, the public funeral procession with its professional mourners and ancestral masks, was an impossibility. Instead, their burial rites were far simpler, more discreet, and profoundly private. A small procession, perhaps just a few family members and friends, would accompany the body to a communal burial ground outside the city walls. There, a simple cremation might take place on a small pyre, or the body might be interred in a humble grave. There was no grand tomb, no elaborate inscription, just a quiet farewell, a final act of respect performed away from the grandeur of public spectacle. Imagine the crackle of the flames, the rising smoke, and the quiet sobs of the family as they watch their loved one's body turn to ash. A raw, personal experience of loss, even after the burial. The connection to the deceased continued in private. Romans performed annual rites, parentalia, to honor their ancestors, visiting the tombs, offering food, wine, and flowers. These were often intimate family gatherings, a private communion with the spirits of the departed. Imagine your family gathered quietly at the tomb of your grandmother, sharing a meal, reminiscing about her life, a private ceremony of remembrance that reinforced family bonds and honored the continuity of lineage. You might whisper prayers to her spirit, asking for guidance or protection, a deeply personal interaction with the unseen world of the ancestors. The Roman approach to death, particularly its private dimensions, reveals a society grappling with mortality, superstition, and the enduring human need to honor and remember those who have passed. The quiet solemnity of the vigil, the painstaking preparation of the body, the hushed mourning, and the simple, heartfelt burial rites. These were the unseen acts of love, duty, and fear that defined the Roman experience of death for the vast majority. When no one was watching, the Roman family faced its greatest sorrow with a blend of ancient tradition and deeply personal grief, reminding you that beneath the monumental achievements of empire, the most profound human experiences unfolded in the silent, sacred space of the private home, a space where sorrow was shared, memories cherished, and the boundary between life and death felt terrifyingly thin. Makes you realize how much our modern world has sanitized and distanced us from the raw, visceral reality of death, a stark contrast to the intimate, hands-on farewells of ancient Rome. Finally, let us conclude our journey into what Romans did when no one was watching by exploring perhaps the most profound and individual acts of all, the quiet contemplation, the intellectual rebellion, and the search for truth and meaning undertaken in solitude. Forget the boisterous public debates in the forum, the rhetoric of politicians, or the grand pronouncements of official state religion. We're stepping into the private studies, the secluded gardens, and the silent minds of Roman philosophers and thinkers who, away from the performative demands of society, wrestled with questions of ethics, existence, and the very nature of humanity. You, with your access to boundless information and diverse viewpoints, might still recognize the timeless human impulse to seek deeper understanding, to question the status quo, and to find solace in the life of the mind, often in quiet defiance of societal norms. Imagine yourself a Roman intellectual, perhaps a senator like Seneca or an emperor like Marcus Aurelius, or even an educated freedman or woman. Your public life is dictated by duty, expectation, and the demands of empire. But in your private moments, in the quiet hours after the household has retired, or in the serene solitude of a secluded garden, your mind turns to deeper matters. You pick up a scroll not of official decrees or legal texts, but of Greek philosophy, Plato, Aristotle, Epicurus, Zeno. These are texts that challenge the very foundations of your public life, inviting introspection and questioning. The act of reading and contemplating philosophy was, for many Romans, a profoundly private pursuit. While some philosophical schools had public lectures, the true engagement with these ideas often occurred in the solitude of one's own study, tablinum, or library. Imagine you are seated on a simple chair, perhaps near a window overlooking a quiet courtyard, the soft glow of an oil lamp illuminating the parchment. You slowly unroll the scroll, your eyes tracing the Greek or Latin script, your mind grappling with complex concepts, the nature of virtue, the pursuit of happiness, the acceptance of fate, the meaning of life and death. This is not a collective endeavor. It is a personal journey, a wrestling with ideas that directly impact your individual soul. For some, this private philosophical inquiry led to a quiet rebellion against the prevailing social norms. The Cynics, for example, advocated a radical rejection of material possessions, social conventions, and public esteem. While few Romans could openly embrace such a lifestyle without losing their social standing, an individual might privately adopt Cynic principles, questioning the endless pursuit of wealth, power, and fame that defined Roman elite society. Imagine a wealthy senator outwardly participating in the rituals of power, but inwardly holding a deep disdain for the corruption and superficiality he witnessed, a private Stoic acceptance of inevitable suffering, or an Epicurean pursuit of quiet contentment. These were private ethical struggles, internal dialogues conducted far from the public gaze, shaping their personal conduct in ways often invisible to others. Marcus Aurelius's Meditations is perhaps the most famous example of such private philosophical practice. Written not for publication but as a series of personal reflections and self-exhortations, his work offers a profound glimpse into the mind of an emperor, grappling with Stoic philosophy in the face of immense public responsibility. Imagine him, the most powerful man in the world, sitting in his tent on a military campaign or in a quiet corner of his palace, scribbling down thoughts on virtue, duty, and the transience of life. These were not public pronouncements, but an intimate conversation with himself, a private quest for inner peace and moral clarity. A testament to the fact that even the most public figures sought solace and guidance in the solitude of philosophical reflection, away from the weight of public expectation. Quiet dissent, too, could manifest through philosophical means. While open political opposition often led to exile or execution, subtle critiques of imperial power or societal corruption could be expressed in private philosophical discussions among trusted friends, or in literary works that veiled their critiques in allegory or historical analogy. Imagine a small group of intellectuals meeting in a private Roman garden, discussing the tyranny of Nero or the excesses of Caligula, not with overt revolutionary fervor, but through the lens of philosophical principles, lamenting the decline of republican virtues. These were dangerous conversations, conducted in hushed tones away from informers, a private act of intellectual resistance against an authoritarian regime, the search for personal meaning, beyond the communal rituals of state religion, also often took place in solitude. While Romans participated in public cults, many found deeper spiritual satisfaction in personal philosophical contemplation. They grappled with existential questions. What is my purpose? What happens after death? How should I live a good life? These were deeply personal inquiries, answers to which could not always be found in the official pantheon. They turned to philosophical schools not just for intellectual exercise, but for a guide to life, a framework for personal ethics that provided comfort and meaning in an often brutal world. These were quiet spiritual journeys undertaken in the privacy of their own minds, shaping their internal moral compass when no one was there to dictate it. The very act of writing, for many, was a private process of self-discovery and reflection. Seneca's letters, while published, clearly originate from a deeply personal, contemplative space. He writes to a friend, but also to himself, articulating his philosophical principles, grappling with his own weaknesses, and offering advice that springs from his private struggles. This kind of introspective writing was a profound act of self-examination, a way to organize one's thoughts and solidify one's convictions, all done in the quiet privacy of the study, far from the performative nature of public rhetoric. This private intellectual life, this quiet rebellion of the mind, provided a crucial counterbalance to the public demands of Roman society. It allowed individuals to maintain their integrity, to question authority, and to find personal meaning in a world that often demanded conformity. When no one was watching, the Roman intellectual could shed the masks of public life and engage in a sincere, often agonizing quest for truth and self-understanding, reminding you that the most profound revolutions often begin not in public squares, but in the silent chambers of the human mind. It's a testament to the enduring human spirit that seeks not just power or pleasure, but deeper wisdom and connection, a fundamental human impulse that transcends empires and millennia, a quiet echo of your own search for meaning in the solitude of your own thoughts. And as you reflect on these hidden lives, these unseen struggles and triumphs, you realize that the most compelling stories of humanity are often found not in the grand narratives, but in the intimate, unobserved moments, where the human spirit truly reveals itself, raw and unfiltered.